Hey everyone, welcome to Tony's Top 5. I'm Tony, and every week we pick a different topic, and I pick my 5 favorite things about that topic. Happy belated Star Wars Day. Now, for anyone that doesn't have social media or a Disney Plus account, or you're dead but you haven't been able to enter the afterlife yet, so you're stuck on Earth for a little bit, this past Thursday was International Star Wars Day. It's a little bit corny, but everyone's saying May the 4th be with you. And then some people get a little bit more carried away and they start saying stuff like Revenge of the 6th. And then before you know it, you don't have any friends left. I love Star Wars though. Without a doubt, one of my favorite movie franchises of all time. I mean, a complete beacon of American science fiction, one of the best displays of creativity of all time. I know there's been some lame stuff that has happened with it over the years, ever since a certain mega corporation took it over. But that doesn't change the fact that it's just a really cool thing that a lot of people are into. And I don't think any amount of cash machine, over the top franchise dog shit can change the fact that Star Wars is awesome. Let me share a pathetic but also adorable memory with you guys. A 7-year-old Tony was watching an episode of Muppet Babies in the mid-1990s, and they did a skit where they were making fun of Star Wars, and I had no clue what the hell was going on. So I asked my dad what they were making fun of there, and he told me about Star Wars, and I said, "Oh, okay, is it a movie?" He said, "Yeah." So we got in the car that day, and we drove over to this local video rental place near where I lived called Movie King, and we rented Star Wars: A New Hope. Now, at the time, that's the only thing Star Wars that I thought there was. So I watched that movie and I loved it. But I was a little bit let down by the ending because it seemed like there was a lot that was still left to be talked about. And I said to my dad, "That's it?" And he said, "Oh, no, there's actually 2 other ones." I was like, "Oh, really?" I think it was later that week, my dad went out and bought the actual box trilogy set. And that was around that time when it was a big deal to get all 3 of those on VHS. So he went out and bought that, and I watched those 3 on repeat for probably the next several months. And then a few years after that, they came out with The Phantom Menace and then the rest of the prequels. And then by the time I got out of high school, they were already starting to do different series and the new Force Awakens movies and all that universe. So over my past 33 years, I've lived through a lot of Star Wars stuff. Now, reflecting on these memories and also the fact that Star Wars Day just passed this week, I figured what cooler thing to do than list my top 5 favorite Star Wars movies. Now, I'm sure some will be outraged at this list because the best way to piss off a Star Wars nerd is to express an opinion that's different than theirs. But anyway, I'm excited to do this. I don't have too many rules for this list, but the main thing is it's only going to be stuff that was featured on the big screen. None of the series or any offshoot movies or anything like that. So without wasting any more time, let's go. All right, number 5 on my list of my top 5 favorite Star Wars movies, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. It's really easy to shit on the prequels. I mean, Episode 1 was basically pod racing and then Anakin saying goodbye to his mom, and Episode 2 was a love story. But Episode 3 was actually pretty cool. I mean, it tied a lot of stuff together from the past 2 movies and really provided like a precursor into the original movies. So I generally don't hate on that one as much because I actually liked it. I mean, we got to see how Emperor Palpatine destroyed democracy. We saw Obi-Wan and Vader battle it out, and we got to basically see how Vader ended up the way he did. And then we got to see how Luke and Leia ended up with their adopted families. It was basically what most fans of the original trilogy were waiting for. Was it perfect? No, it did have some stuff about it that you could critique, but I thought it was pretty cool. And also, Ewan McGregor as the younger Obi-Wan Kenobi is always great. He was great in all 3 installments of that trilogy, and he was even really good in the most recent series they did. The whole Order 66 thing was pretty dark, and it actually brought in some key elements of how a lot of autocrats around the world installed dictatorships in places where democracy used to exist. So I thought that was pretty cool too. Again, was this the best Star Wars movie ever? No, but given how much the regular prequels get bashed all the time, I think this was by far the best of the prequels, and I actually liked it. So I got no issue putting it in my top 5. Okay, moving on to number 4 on my list of my top 5 favorite Star Wars movies, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. If someone has a favorite Star Wars movie list and A New Hope doesn't make their top 5, I have some serious questions for them. I mean, this movie's where it all began. Say what you want about it, but it's the keystone of it all. I mean, without this movie, if this wouldn't have been a critical success, then there wouldn't be anything else. There wouldn't be this universe we know. There would be no rides at Disney, no collectible action figures, and George Lucas would just be Steven Spielberg's buddy who faded after making American Graffiti. The cultural impact that this film had was unbelievable. Moviegoers had never really seen space travel like this before. I mean, the whole Buck Rogers string and marionette spaceship deal was still alive and well into the early 70s. So this blew people's minds when they saw a spaceship flying through the air, even though it was a model and everything, but just the way they filmed it, and they were like, that looks real. This film, too, launched the careers of Harrison Ford, James Earl Jones, and that's about it. Family Guy kind of nailed it right here.
I'm Han Solo, captain of the Millennium Falcon, and the only actor whose career isn't destroyed by this movie.
My favorite thing about this film, though, is that it left you wanting more. It did exactly what its job was supposed to be. I mean, you basically only see a fraction of Vader's power, and you only see Luke get like maybe 5 minutes of Jedi training. After people watched this, they were like, no, wait, you have to do more movies to explain this. I obviously talked about this film in my intro, so I don't have too much else to say about it. I mean, just a great movie, and it should be in every Star Wars fan's top 5 favorite Star Wars movies. All right, moving on to number 3 on my list of my top 5 favorite Star Wars movies, Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. There's a lot of people out there that love to hate on this movie, and to that I say shame on you. I mean, there were some really cool lightsaber battles in this movie, and it had a happy ending. We kind of needed that after all the dark shit that happened in Empire. When I was a kid, this was actually my favorite of the trilogy. Empire's kind of scared me a little bit, so seeing all of this stuff happen in Return of the Jedi that kind of tied everything together and everyone kind of went home happy, I liked that. I even thought the Ewoks were cool. Yeah, they were a little bit silly, but it's also a sci-fi fantasy movie, so don't take it too seriously. Jeez. But also being a nature lover as a kid, I really loved the Forest Moon of Endor. I mean, it was a completely different scenery than we were used to in the rest of the Star Wars movies. I think as an adult, I have a lot more of an appreciation for the ending of this movie. I mean, the encounter between Anakin and Luke at the end when Anakin's dying, it's really moving because you're seeing this full 360 of a character, especially since you've seen all the prequels now. I mean, he starts out as innocent kid, then frustrated teenager, then savage killer, tyrant, and now he's this father that saved his son's life, restored balance to the Force, and killed the Emperor. Talk about character transformation. I also enjoyed seeing all the aerial battles as a kid, and the Rebel fleet versus the Imperial fleet, and even Admiral Akbar was pretty cool. I know he's been turned into a meme, but I don't care. And aside from Anakin's character transformation, we see some really cool character transformation with Luke. I mean, in A New Hope, he's basically this naive kid that's never left his hometown. And by the Return of the Jedi movie, he is basically this like calm, collected warrior. I mean, just in the opening scene where he uses Jedi mind tricks to infiltrate Jabba the Hutt's compound to get in there, I mean, that was really cool to watch. Yeah, so 10-year-old Tony would have had this at the top of my list. But it doesn't matter what age I am, Return of the Jedi is always going to score high on my list. I mean, just a great movie and a great ending to the original trilogy. All right, number 2 on my list of my top 5 favorite Star Wars movies, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. This movie came out roughly a year after The Force Awakens did. And a lot of people, including myself, flocked to the theaters to see The Force Awakens because we were bitter about the prequels and we just wanted to see something new, and we knew that Han Solo and Chewbacca were going to be in this movie. Now, while The Force Awakens was kind of meh, I just kind of really didn't have it in me to go see another Star Wars movie a year after that, especially when I had no clue what it was about or where it fell into the Star Wars universe. But a couple people whose opinions I really value, especially when it comes to Star Wars movies, they were telling me that it was a must-see. So I decided to give it a shot. My God, was I not let down. I mean, in the first 5 minutes of this film, it actually feels like a Star Wars movie. I mean, there were some intense battle scenes, guerrilla warfare, and some pretty intimidating drones. Oh, and like in the first half hour, you see a Wampa from one of the battles. Blast from the past. There's a lot of criticism that the characters weren't very memorable in this film, but in a way they didn't really have a chance to be. They literally came and went, and it's not like we had an entire series of movies to get to know them either. But the two main protagonists, they were pretty cool, and they definitely did their job and were believable characters. And even a lot of the other Rebel characters were pretty cool too. I mean, the one blind guy that like used the Force to defeat his opponents, and then his one buddy that had like that huge machine gun, and even that battle droid was badass. So they were pretty cool characters. I just can't really remember their names. The number one coolest thing about this movie, though, and I think most people would agree with me, is that we finally get to see the true dark side of Vader. I mean, just that one scene towards the end where all of those rebel fighters are stuck in that hallway with him, and he just goes into full slasher mode and slaughters all of them. Every nerd in the world was on the edge of his seat. I mean, my God, it was just so well choreographed, and it was horrifying because we never really got to see Vader in that, complete destroyer mode before. So that was really cool. I say this a lot on my top 5 videos, but I probably would have really put this as a tie with Return of the Jedi for spots 2 and 3. But the thing is, Return of the Jedi existed during peak Star Wars time, where this movie came out during a time when I was really starting to lose hope in Star Wars. So I think with that scenario right there, Rogue One definitely deserves a number 2 spot on this list. Really cool movie, and yeah, I stand by that. Number 2. Fight me if you want. All right, number 1 on my list of my top 5 favorite Star Wars movies, and one that probably all of you were able to guess by now, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Now, I understand that it can be cliche to have Empire as your favorite Star Wars movie, but I want you to look me into my dark guinea eyes and see if I care. There's a reason that it's everyone's favorite Star Wars movie, because it's great. It's possibly one of the best movies ever made. Now, like I was saying earlier, when I was a kid, Return of the Jedi was my favorite. I mean, cute Ewoks, Vader becomes a good guy, happy ending. That was not the case with Empire. I mean, Empire left me shook when I watched it as a kid. I mean, the rebels actually lose a battle, Vader cuts Luke's hand off, and then Han Solo gets frozen in a carbonite casing. I mean, Jesus, my 7-year-old mind is already ruined from Mountain Dew and lead paint, and then you drop this dark shit on me? My God, was it done in an amazing way, though. I mean, Return of the Jedi was such a good movie because it had the privilege of following up and tying together all of the tragedies that happened in Empire. Also, this movie had some really amazing people working on it. Aside from George Lucas, he also brought in Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan to help him write the screenplay. And then he hired the great Irving Kershner to be the director. So it was pretty humble on his part to bring in all of these great minds to create this amazing story. Also, all the different settings that we get introduced to in this movie. I mean, it starts off on the ice planet of Hoth. And then after that, we see Luke travel to the Dagobah system. That's this tropical, swampy planet. And one of the cooler things I had ever seen as a kid. Even the floating cloud city where Lando lives was pretty cool. So, Great characters, great actors, great writing, great set design, great creativity. Just the best thing that has ever been introduced to the Star Wars universe. I stand by that, and I will never back down. So yeah, that's my list. Those are my top 5 favorite Star Wars movies. And there's other Star Wars movies that I do like and that I did enjoy, especially some offshoot series that I thought were pretty cool. But yeah, what would you have added to the list? That's what I want to know. Let me know in the comments, and as always, please put your ideas for future top 5s in the comments. I am really recording a lot of good stuff that people are saying, and I will include it in future videos. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next week.